Chapter 116, The Cumin Winds Blowing from the Lakeside. Fan Xian hemmed and hawed, and did not refute anything, just took the tip of the finger in the palm of his fiancée scratching, although it is two old virgins, but after all, it is also a new generation of Kato Hawk lavished, these small means, whereas Lin Wanner can be forbidden to live with. The girl's family only felt a rush of panic, all a bit unsteady in her seat. Fan Xian shyly came up, or else lean on my arms. Big brother does have a way. Fan Xian sat in the car and refused to come down. He smacked the mosquitoes in the grass, looked at the pair of men and women on the far side of the lake and marveled, "This has just met with my future sister-in-law, and I can sit in one place. If I stay for a few more hours, won't it be an early wedding?" Fan Roro let out a giggle, only that although she knew that her elder brother would occasionally visit his sister-in-law's fragrant boudoir at night, she really wasn't clear on how often Fan Xian and Lin Wanner met, so she was equally a bit surprised and impressed after seeing this scene. "Quickly come down and help unload things." Ruo patted Fan Xia's head and said with a smile, "It's never good to let those guards do it." Fan Xia stared and said, "What are these underlings for?" Fan Roro smiled faintly and said, "They are all maids, but they are not as strong as you." For some reason, once he saw Fan Roro's light smile, Fan Xia, the second-generation ancestor, was scared for no reason and obediently climbed down from the carriage and started to help those dainty maids unload things. It's no wonder that Fan Roro wanted him to help. Fan Xian brought quite a lot of things on his trip this day, and a few maids plus Fan Xia tossed and turned for half a day before they were able to get it down. Fan Xia wiped the sweat on his forehead and shouted to the lake, "Big brother. Things are unloaded, what are they?" Fan Xian, who was sitting on the edge of the lake, heard this shout and only then remembered these things, and with a slap of his head and a somewhat embarrassed apology to Wanner, he got up and patted the crushed grass clippings under his hips, walked over to the side of the wagon, and began to instruct everyone on how to arrange things. After settling down in Kyoto, Grandma had sent over all those household goods he had left behind in Tanyu, so they all came in handy today. There were 3 handmade tents, 1 barbecue iron rack, several pieces of large-eyed wire mesh, 1 bag of pepper and cumin canisters, a number of salts, a number of bamboo strips, a number of eggs, a few river fish, a large pile of radishes and bean curd, 1 bag of fine charcoal, and all in all a complete barbecue setup. A maid pointed at the rags piled together and asked curiously, "What is this?" Fan Xian kindly explained, "A tent." The maiden was very studious. "Is it for marching and fighting?" Fan Xian said with a slight smile, "You can also watch the stars by the lake at night." When she saw the smile on Mr. Fan's face and the warmth in his bright eyes, the maid was no longer studious and went elsewhere to hide her face in shame. After building a carbon fire, someone naturally came over to take over. Fan Xian moved a stone and sat on the edge of the iron net, carefully applying the sauce and ingredients. The bamboo stick passed through the fish. The light fragrance emanated out with the steaming of the fire. He twitched his nose, glanced at Wanner, who was sitting alone by the lake in the distance, smiled slightly, and did not put too heavy flavor. After grilling 3 skewers of fish and handing 1 to each of his younger siblings, he walked towards the lake and sat beside Lin Wanner. "Here." Fan Xian smiled gently. Lin Wanner gave him a look full of suspicion, thinking to herself, "Can your handiwork work?" Taking it, she carefully placed it on her lips and tasted it, then slowly chewed it. Her eyes gradually brightened up, looking at Fan Xian with a cheeky smile, but she was not even close to praising him, and began to feast on it. Only that the roasted fish was too hot, and while she couldn't bear to let the fish leave her lips, it was scalding and she was spitting out her tongue, her empty hand constantly fanning in front of her mouth, and huffing and puffing. "Cute, really cute, can love." Fan Xian looked at her fleshy lips, and somehow thought of the chicken leg at the first encounter at the Qing temple, teasingly said, "Chenner, I haven't sparingly taken chicken legs for you to eat in these recent days. Why are you still so greedy?" Lin Wanner puffed up her face and said with an angry grunt, "If I had known that you baked something so fragrant, I wouldn't have eaten that cold chicken leg." Fan Xian laughed, almost fell down in the back. His fiancée's temperament is really flavorful, sometimes will be shy, lowered his head, do not dare to look at his own glance, sometimes, but will make some love to increase the interest of the small sex. Sickly bodied but like to play the little tiger, or that one word, Q, 2 words, cute, 3 words, kawaii. Lin Wan-er looked back, only to see the barbecue stall there than the lake to be more lively. Fan Sijia has long nibbled on the hand of the grilled fish, is there to command the whole, made a few corn cobs baked to eat. Only Ruoro will eat more elegant, while walking along the forest. I do not know whether it is looking at the scenery, or thinking about what matters. Eyes fell on the pile of things unloaded from the carriage. Lin wanted more and more feel their fiancé some odd, curious to ask, in previous years out to play, mostly in the mountain village to eat, also did not see the following: these maids are so happy. There is also, you take these things today, look at how some of the rare. Fan Xian smiled and explained, although they are all maids, they are all big maids who live with you, and all day long, they are well dressed, and how many of them have really cooked for themselves? Today's barbecue doesn't necessarily taste as good, but it's better to do it yourself. It feels different, and the taste buds react differently. Taste buds? Lin Wan-er was a little confused, looking at Fan Xian with wide eyes. Some sort of small organ on a person's tongue that can sense flavors. Fan Xian knew that it was difficult to explain this clearly. After all, the naked eye is not as good as a microscope, and casually explained, the root of the tongue feels bitter, and the front of the tongue feels sweet, that's why. Lin Wan-er smiled and said, in the end, you are worthy of being Lord Fei's student, so clear about these things. When he heard her mention Fei Jie, Fan Xian was in a rage. After all, he had a good relationship with himself as a teacher and disciple. He had come to Kyoto for several months. Even Chen Pingping had already returned to Kyoto. Why Fei Jie refused to come back? It is really a bit excessive. First will be these things thrown down, looking at Wan-er envious gaze. Fan Xian and the whole 2 people small stove, took some materials over, the 2 people baked and ate, of course, most of the cases is Fan Xian in the baking, Lin Wan-er in the eating. Surrounded by the aroma, the unmarried couple launched a gentle attack on the ingredients on the warm carbon fire. This seasoning doesn't seem to be very common either. Lin Wan-er stretched out her tender tongue and gently licked away a sesame seed on the corner of her lips, sighing with immense satisfaction, it really smells good. Just kidding, sesame seeds are available at the door, this bit of cumin is not easy to find. Fan Xian thought in his heart, if he didn't have a good relationship with the shopkeepers of Qing Yutang, it would not be easy to put together all these things that he pulled to the summer residence today, but on his mouth he said back, if you like it, I will do it every day for you to eat after I get married. Lin Wan-er's face became extremely fast, of course not the kind of change of turning the other cheek, just listening to the word marriage, and habitually shyly bowed her head. Just today this occasion is somewhat not quite suitable, her lips are still full of grease. The tip of her nose there is also a smear of ash, how to look like in their own kitchen stealing food from the little boy. Fan Xian looked at her face and laughed. Chen really is not a particularly beautiful girl, but I do not know why, in his own eyes, always feel that none of her features can be faulted, no trace of her demeanor is not lovely. Seeing him laugh at himself, Lin Wan-er some annoyed gesture to pounce. Fan Xian hurriedly opened his arms ready to give up his life to feed the tiger. Anyway, the lake is far away. A large clump of aquatic would just block the eyes of those maids. Fan Xian thought that he could be the first time to openly take the fragrant jade into his arms, but Wan-er was embarrassed, forced to stop the momentum of rolling down Fan Xian's arms. Fan Xian shook his head somewhat helplessly, and took his handkerchief to the lake to moisten it, then turned back to sit beside Lin Wan-er, staring at her face, and very carefully wiping away the gray stains on the tip of her nose and chin. The 2 of them were extremely close, and feeling the gentle and attentive gaze of her husband, Lin Wan-er was nervous, her hands tightly clutching the hem of her jacket. Fan Xian also found her nervousness, a moment of disorientation, holding a wet handkerchief hand paused on the side of her pink cheeks, eyes on each other. It seems that even the sound of breathing began to intertwine, each other undulating, began to mix the frequency, gradually accelerated. The heart is not as good as action. Fan Xian, without saying anything, lowered his head and then kissed on her forehead. Lin Wanner was shocked, turned shy, and then was faintly disappointed. Just before her disappointment had a chance to hide down, Fan Xian's lips had already blocked her mouth that was ready to fake anger, wet, soft, fragrant, and sweet. Ouch! Fan Xian realized that his lower lip had been viciously bitten by the little girl and hurriedly straightened up, allowing his lips to flee the scene of the crime. Fixed his eyes, but found Wan Er's eyes full of laughter, only this laughter in more than a few silk spring charm, just as the two people around this lake in general, water waves such as a mirror but still slightly high and low soft flow, stirring the heart. The most adorable, or the girl smiles non-smile, white as a clean shell of the upper incisors. Also cute and incomparable bite in their own meaty lower lip. Fan Xian's heart swirled, summoning up his remaining courage, pulling his future wife into his arms, no longer letting her escape, his fingers tapping her soft cheeks, whispering, "Little tiger, beware I eat you." Lin Wan Er's body nervously froze in his arms, like a spring lake, but her eyes were still mesmerized. She bit her lower lip and looked at Fan Xian and said, "Wan Er's body is not well, is Lang Jun willing to give up?"